We are counting down 10 sailboats that flopped at the dealership, boats the market called failed, but that became secret legends at sea. They were dismissed as too cheap or outdated, and some designs were mocked as too weird. Each of these boats failed in the marketplace, and yet they stunned the sailing world with hidden strengths. Some were written off for bargain prices. Others were ignored for quirky rigs or old-school looks. A rare few survived real storms and long ocean crossings, while trendier yachts quietly vanished. These boats kept crossing oceans when the market had already moved on. So what did the market miss? Why are these so-called failures still crossing oceans decades later? Let us start our countdown at number 10, where a budget boat's reputation hid something far tougher than anyone expected. In the late 1970s, dealers lined up Hunter 25s on their lots with the lowest price tags in town. Sometimes so low, people joked you could buy one for less than a new pickup. The boat quickly picked up a reputation as the budget underdog. A dealer memo from 1977 did not mince words. It warned the boat was too cheap and would not cross a gulf. But out on the water, the Hunter 25 told a different story. Early owner surveys and hands-on measurements reported solid fiberglass hulls up to half an inch thick, sometimes even more. That toughness made them heavier than most rivals in their class. In 1982, a letter published in Cruising World described a Hunter 25 making an 80-mile Gulf Stream crossing, shrugging off rough seas with nothing more than a tired helmsman and a proud owner. For beginners, the roomy cabin and forgiving handling meant more weekends afloat, and fewer worries about breaking the bank or the boat. The market saw a bargain. Sailors found a workhorse. Sometimes the cheapest boat in the yard is the one built to last. Pearson rolled out the 26 in 1970, but you would barely know it if you flipped through their old catalogs. The spotlight always landed on the bigger 28 and 30, leaving the 26 looking like a footnote. Magazine reviews did not help. In 1975, Sailing World brushed it off as just another plastic coastal cruiser. But sailors who actually took the helm found something the market missed, a perfectly balanced sail plan that made the boat almost impossible to scare. The secret was in the rudder-to-keel geometry. With the rudder set well aft and the keel running deep, the Pearson 26 tracked straight, even when the wind piped up. Owner logs from the late 1970s tell of broaches that looked dramatic, but ended with the boat popping back up, sails flapping, crew shaken but safe. For new skippers, that forgiving helm meant learning by doing without the penalty of a dangerous mistake. Overshadowed in the showroom, the 26 quietly became the boat that taught an entire generation how to sail with confidence. Columbia's catalog in the early 1970s was a maze, 20 models all jostling for attention on crowded dealer lots. The Columbia 29 got lost in the shuffle. Dealers shrugged it off as just another number. One memo from 1971 read, "Nothing special, move the 30-foot models instead." But the 29 had a secret. Its hull had generous volume and a prismatic ratio built for tracking, so it could hold course for days, something you would never guess from its sales sheet. While unsold hulls stacked up in the warehouse, a handful of owners quietly logged blue water passages. The Columbia Yacht Owners Association archives show multiple ocean deliveries, including a 1974 log from a skipper who sailed non-stop from California to Hawaii. No fanfare, just a steady hand and a boat that never wandered off course. Years later, sailors combing through the back pages of old owner forums found proof. The forgotten sibling was not just another coastal cruiser, it was a sleeper, an offshore boat hiding in plain sight, outlasting trendier cousins that vanished with the next sales cycle. MacGregor's 26X arrived in the late 1990s with a splash and a flood of criticism. Sailors and reviewers saw the water ballast and wrote it off as a toy. Practical Sailor ran a harsh review in 1995. Old-timers scoffed at filling tanks with water instead of carrying a heavy lead keel. The design was mocked. Then something wild happened on the boat ramps. More than 5,000 26X hulls rolled off trailers in the first 7 years. Weekend sailors hooked them to minivans, drove them to lakes, and launched in places where traditional sailboats could not even dream of going. Owner forums filled with stories of families towing coast to coast, launching at dawn and setting off for a day of sailing and camping. Owners loved that the 26X could cruise at 15 miles per hour under power before raising sail for a sunset drift. The water ballast took a minute to fill, but once it was in, the boat settled and handled better than the critics ever expected. Some owners logged trips from the Great Lakes to the Gulf, proving the 26X could handle more than a picnic. The market laughed, but the MacGregor 26X quietly created a new kind of freedom. Fast, flexible, and ready for adventure wherever road and water met. Sometimes the boat that gets mocked the hardest ends up changing what sailing means for a whole new crowd. Westsail's 28-foot model always lived in the shadow of its famous big sister. Dealers called it a shrunken 32, and buyers walked right past, convinced that smaller meant weaker. But the numbers tell a different story. The Westsail 28 carries a displacement to length ratio over 350, which means it is every bit as heavy for its size as the legendary 32. That is not just a number on a spec sheet, it is the reason these boats feel glued to the water when the wind howls. The hull layup matches the 32's thickness, with solid fiberglass running deep and long, and a full keel that tracks straight through confused seas. Owner logs from the late 70s and the 80s describe rough offshore runs, days of pounding in the Gulf of Alaska or beating into North Pacific squalls, where the little 28 came back with nothing worse than a bruised ego and salt-stained decks. There are not any headline rescue stories, but there also are not any tales of disaster. Survey reports and storm photos show hulls battered but unbowed, proof that this boat was built for the same heaven and hell conditions as her bigger sibling. The market wanted size. Sailors who know the numbers see the 28 for what it is, a blue water boat in a compact shell, hiding true ocean grit behind a forgotten name, the Freedom 33. Cat Ketch wasn't just another oddball in the marina. It was the boat that made old salts shake their heads and mutter, "Accident waiting to happen." No wires, no shrouds, just two tall freestanding masts rising straight from the deck like something out of a science fiction magazine. Gary Hoyt, the man behind the design, didn't mind the sideways glances. He had spent years sailing short-handed and wanted a rig so simple, even a tired sailor could reef or drop sail in a hurry, no winches, no tangles, no drama. The yachting press pounced, but the real test came when the wind howled. One owner, recalling a sudden squall in the Gulf, said, "I took in 2 reefs standing in the cockpit, never left the wheel. The boat just kept going, calm as you please." There is a reason for that. With no stays to snap and no complicated rigging, the Freedom 33 shrugs off what would sideline a more traditional boat. Fewer fail points, less maintenance, and a set-and-forget attitude, especially for solo or aging sailors who want peace of mind more than a trophy. The market called it too weird, but those who actually sailed one found something rare, real freedom, and a boat that looked out for its crew when the weather turned ugly. By the late 70s, the Alberg 30 was already being called old-fashioned. Dealers complained about her long overhangs and full keel. They said she was too slow and too classic. Shoppers wanted racy lines and flat sterns, not a boat that looked like it sailed out of a black and white postcard. But while the market chased trends, the Alberg 30 quietly built a record most of her flashier rivals never touched. Her thick hull and deep integrated keel were more than tradition. They were a passport to the open ocean. Owner logs tell the real story. More than a dozen documented Atlantic crossings logged by everyday sailors, not just professionals. Her motion in a seaway was predictable, steady, and forgiving. That motion earned quiet respect from the people who actually took her offshore. Survey reports decades later still praise the original layup. They note hulls that often need little more than fresh paint to keep going. The critics dismissed her as a relic. But for sailors who value coming home over coming in first, the Alberg 30 became a legend. In marina corners and owner meetups, stories circulate of battered sails and tired crews, and always the same ending. The Alberg made landfall, safe and sound. Some boats win races. Some just keep returning from the sea year after year. The Alberg 30 belongs to the second kind, and that is the one that matters when the forecast turns ugly. O'Day's 27-foot boat was the one nobody fought over on the sales floor. In the late 1970s, dealers called it cheap plastic. That label stuck. It came from the way O'Day churned out hulls to meet sales quotas, not from any real flaw in the boat. Brochures promised a big boat feel in a compact package, but buyers wanted flashier brands or bigger numbers. The 27s piled up at the back of the lot, discounted and forgotten. But while dealers rolled their eyes, something else was brewing. The O'Day 27's real secret was not its price or its looks. It was the way owners rallied around it. Early sailors found the boat's modular systems made it easy to fix, even for a first-timer with a wrench and a little patience. The interior, though simple, felt bright and open, with just enough space to bring friends for a weekend. Owner forums filled with advice, upgrade tips, and stories of family cruises. By the time social media groups took off, the O'Day 27 had one of the liveliest online communities in the classic boat world. Hundreds of active members, swap meets, and annual raft-ups followed. Resale numbers tell the tale. Boats once written off as plastic filler now change hands quickly. Often they sell for more than the asking price from a decade ago. The O'Day 27's reputation is not built on racing trophies or blue water drama. It is built on thousands of friendships, backyard repairs, and the simple joy of a boat that just works. Sometimes all it takes is a strong community to turn a so-called failure into a classic worth keeping afloat. Charlie Morgan never liked to play it safe, and the Morgan 32 proved it. When it launched in the early 1970s, the plan was simple. Build a boat that could race hard on Sunday and cruise in comfort the rest of the week. But the world of sailboat racing was changing fast. The International Offshore Rule, known to sailors as IOR, was rewriting what made a boat competitive. Morgan's design, with its distinctive pinched ends and clever hull shape, was meant to outsmart the rule. Then the rule changed almost overnight, and the 32 was left without a clear home. Dealers scratched their heads. One review in Practical Sailor called it unsure what it wants to be. Owners looking for a pure racer found themselves outgunned by newer, boxier hulls. Cruisers, meanwhile, wondered why the cockpit and interior felt so different from the usual fare. But the sailors who stuck with the 32 found something special. Underneath the confusion, there was a boat that handled like a dream. The cockpit, designed for racing, made sail handling simple even for a short-handed crew. The hull, with balanced lines and moderate displacement, tracked straight in a blow and never felt sluggish. Club race logs from the late 1970s show the 32 quietly collecting trophies in local fleets, especially when the wind piped up and the newer designs struggled to keep their footing. Owner forums today are filled with praise for the boat's versatility. One longtime skipper wrote, "It's the only 30-footer I've sailed that feels happy in a squall or a sunset drift." Charlie Morgan himself once called the 32 his most misunderstood design. The market wanted a clear winner or a clear cruiser, but this boat was both, just in ways the sales charts could not measure. Years later, sailors searching for a smart hybrid are rediscovering the 32 as a quiet masterpiece, proof that sometimes the math on paper misses the magic on the water. The Nicholson 32 never stood a chance in the showroom. In the early 1970s, when speed was king and the Whitbread race filled sailors' heads with dreams of planing hulls, the Nicholson 32 was dismissed as hopelessly slow and overbuilt. British tank was the phrase that stuck, usually followed by a smirk. Yachting Monthly called her a relic from another era. Dealers could not move them. The market wanted flash, not a boat that looked ready for the Battle of the Atlantic. But the sea had other ideas. The Nicholson 32's thick fiberglass hull was laid up heavy, with a modular inner structure and bonded bulkheads. And it was not just for show. Surveyors poking around decades later found hulls with barely a stress crack even after years of hard use. The secret lay in the construction, each boat divided into watertight sections with an encapsulated lead keel down low in the belly. If the worst happened, a grounding, a knockdown, even a hull breach, the compartments kept water from spreading and the boat stayed afloat. Owners called it impossible to sink without real effort. Reserve buoyancy and strength were built in. Stories from the North Atlantic fill the Nicholson 32 Owners Association logs. One sailor, battered by a force 9 gale off the coast of Ireland, wrote that they took 3 knockdowns, lost the Dodger, but the boat never gave an inch. Another, crossing to the Azores, described green water sweeping the decks for hours, but the bulkheads held and the boat rode high. The most famous Nicholson 32, Gulliver G, carried Claire Frances solo across the Atlantic in 1973, and her logbook tells of days spent hove to in mid-Atlantic gales, the boat steady as a church pew. Surveyors still praise the design's reserve buoyancy. The hull's thickness, the low freeboard, and the careful isolation of tanks and engine, every detail aimed at keeping the boat upright and afloat. While lighter boats snapped masts and flooded during famous storms, Nicholson 32s quietly came home, battered but proud. The critics called her slow, but sailors learned a different lesson. You cannot outrun every storm, but you can outlast one. When safety matters more than speed, the Nicholson 32 stands alone. The boat that proved once and for all that survival is not a sales feature, it is a legacy. Across all 10 of these so-called failures, one truth stands out. The market's judgment fades, but real seaworthiness endures. Time rewards the boats built to last, not just to sell. These underdogs keep crossing oceans while flashier models vanish. In sailing, the crowd rarely knows what matters most. Maybe the finest voyage begins when you stop chasing trends and trust the boat that carries you home. Which one would you choose?